Okay, so this is a presentation, obviously, about blogs and websites, specifically for authors. So anybody that's viewing this deck, feel free to share it. You can modify it, whatever. Just an open content license there. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and what we're going to talk about. So here's all my great qualifications. Blah, blah, blah. I won't go through all that, but just so you know, I've done websites before. I've worked in telecom and R&D for 18 years. I've done a lot of this stuff. I've done some marketing on the software side, so I've got a little bit of experience in this. I don't know everything, obviously, and I'm not a website professional anymore, although I used to get paid to do it. But hopefully I can share a few tidbits with you guys, and we can help teach each other a few things. So we'll go through a few things today. First of all, it's very important to identify who you are. What kind of a writer are you in terms of your career, your goals, your motivations, implementation? There's a lot of things that you want to think about. The very first thing is to understand who you are in your career, where you are in your career. The second thing is, what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do in the next 6 months? Where do you see yourself in the next year? Do you have a 5-year plan? So I'll briefly just talk about those things. Motivation is important. Why do you want to do it? Do you just want to be famous? Do you want to make money? Do you just want to produce a book so that you can share with your family? And there's nothing wrong with that. Lots of people do that. Then we'll get into implementation. So once you've understood what your goals are, how do you go about achieving those goals? So this presentation obviously is going to talk about blogs and websites. We're going to talk a bit about social media, as well as an email list creation, which is a really, really key piece. And then we're also going to talk about sourcing. So where do you get those things? Which tools should you be using? Whether it's Blogger, WordPress, Weebly, what have you. And we'll talk about free options and paid options. And when should you be doing this? Timing and planning. So as I say in my little note there, start now. And you really should. If you're a writer, if you're an author, you should have a website immediately, or at least a blog, and we'll go through some of the must-haves. Make sense, Scott?
Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm with you.
Okay, I make some silly assumptions. A, you don't have a website or blog. You're not a website designer and know very little about any underlying technology like HTML, CSS, etc. So I'm not going to use very fancy terms. And you write something that you want to talk about, or you want to sell your book, or what have you. And I'm also assuming you're an indie, because if you're with a major publishing house, the chances are they will help guide you in terms of setting up a website. Not always, but I hear some people have that experience. Okay, so now we're getting into the identification of who you are, what kind of writer, what kind of business person. Joanna Pan is really good about talking about authorpreneurs, so it's a conjunction of author and entrepreneur. And I think really as an indie author, that's what we all have to be these days, even if we don't want to be. Because it's an unfortunate part of selling our books is that we have to get into the marketing and the business side of things. And we can stick our head in the sand and neglect it, but then you're not going to see your sales, go in a very great direction, if that's what's important to you. Okay, so who are you? Do you write for pleasure? Are you an artist-author? Are you part-time, working on your first book? Are you a full-time author with a series? What relevant skills do you have? Which do you lack? So you want to think about, the kinds of things that you're doing, what skills you have, what skills you don't, so that you can, figure out where you need to get help. And again, defining who you are will help identify the amount of effort and cost that you'll have to outlay to, build a website or what have you. So just think about these questions as we go through the slide deck. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this sort of stuff, but I just wanted to, put it out there that these are important questions to ask yourself and understand, just so that you can be coming from the right place. Like, some people are always going to be part-time writers, and that's fine. Other people write full-time, so they've got a lot more time and energy to spend on certain things. So you have to figure out where you are to, to best find the help you need elsewhere. And so I'm using myself as an example. So what kind of writer is Hugh? Well, I'm a full-time independent author. I started back in 2010, and I went full-time in 2012. I had a couple of years that I was basically completely out of the picture due to a health issue, but I'm back now. So I've got a few books, a few novels. I'm entirely independent. I have my own publishing company. It's not an LLC or incorporated. It's just really a name brand, Asgard Studios, and I have a website for that publishing company as well. In Canada, thankfully, our ISBNs are free, so that does make life a lot easier here. We don't have to pay, hundreds of dollars for a block of a couple of ISBNs and whatnot. I also have technical skills. I've designed websites. I've worked on software. I've done graphic design and marketing. So there's a lot of things that, you may need to go and get help with that, if you don't have those skills. There's a lot of things I can do for myself, thankfully, because, I've had that experience in my professional career. Things like editing, I'm terrible at, so I subcontract that out. That's something I don't do well. I'm also not a very good artist, so I subcontract out the art for my covers. Although I do all my own covers in terms of layout and placement of text, typography, and so forth. I take care of that myself. But I make sure that I pay an artist to produce original artwork and to make sure that I've got something very nice to show my readers. Okay. Any questions so far, Scott?
No, I'm good. I'm right with you.
All right. And for those folks that can't ask questions because you're in the background somewhere, I apologize. But I'll answer them at the end via email or whatever. Okay, so goals. Let's talk about what you want to achieve as a writer. So, again, as I mentioned earlier, maybe you just want to share your experiences as you write. So maybe you want to blog about what you're doing. Maybe you want to tell people about a book you're actually writing. Maybe you want to tell the world that you actually wrote a book. Hey, this book is done. Maybe you want to sell that book and tell people where to get it. So these are the things you need to think about before you can actually construct a strategy to build a website or a blog or whatever. So define some of these things. And some of you may have heard this acronym SMART. Basically, your goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based, I think. But I've got a link there. You can check those out. And there's also a little 7-step business plan for writers that you can refer to. The Google link is just there on the slide deck. Okay, so I've just used some fake goals. These aren't my actual goals, but I just threw some things up here. So as an example, let's say I want to double my current royalty income this year. I want to increase my email subscribers from 300 to 1,000. I want to sell my novels directly on my website. I want to have at least 50 reviews on each of my 3 novels. I want to win an award. And I want to publish 3 novels in 2015. So these are some specific short-term goals that you can craft for yourself so you have an idea of what you want to achieve. And, obviously we should be thinking about short-term goals as well as medium and long-term. So medium, well, I'd like to quadruple my income from 2015. And let's say the midterm is 2 years. I'm just using this as an arbitrary example. So, here I've just got a list of some of the things I'd like to see over the next 24 months. Okay? Longer term, well, I'd like to see myself on the New York Times bestseller list. And if you'll note, I've mocked up a copy of the New York Times with Star Viking by Hugh B. They're on the bestseller list. So yeah, that's not an actual newspaper. That's just me playing with Photoshop. Okay, but I do have some of these goals. These are some of the things that I actually do want to do in my career. And I understand that, and I'm trying to work towards that. So it's really important that if you really want to make sure you achieve something, make sure you define those goals in advance so that you know how to get from A to B, but also so that when you get there, how do you measure success? Well, if you've got a list of goals and you can check them off, you'll know, hey, I did what I set out to do. That's great. So, okay. So next we get into motivation. Why do you want to do it? And this, obviously is tied to goals. So just as important as knowing what you want is knowing why, because it can help you define your what. What do you want to sell? My books. Why? Well, I want to be rich. I want to make a few extra bucks. I want to become a full-time author and quit my day job. What have you. Hughes Y, okay. I'd like to build a nice log cabin in the woods. I want some income security, and I'd like to leave a financial legacy for my son via royalties and savings. So, these are just some of the underlying things. And they're not, it's not, mandatory you go through these kinds of things yourself. But to me, it's important to understand why I want to sell, X number of books, or why I want to, get on the New York Times bestseller list. Okay. So enough of the businessy stuff. Let's get on to the real meat of this that I'm sure you guys are interested in. Implementation. So what you need to get what you want. So if you have written down your goals, you need to compare what you want to achieve with, what kinds of possible solutions are available. So for example, if you want to share your experiences as you write, then a blog is probably the way to go, or just get on social media like Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot. If you want to announce the kind of book you're writing, then again, blog and social media are appropriate platforms. So I'm not going to go through all these, but this is just an idea to show you that you can map your goals to specific solutions. Okay, build the following is the last example, and one possible solution that most authors agree on is to, share content, give away free stuff, and gather email addresses that way. And we'll talk a bit more about that when we get into the email list building section. And we've really already covered these, but the common solutions for the things that you're probably going to want to do are a blog or website, get on social media, and use email list builders. Okay, so what are blogs and websites? You've heard of a blog. It's a contraction for the words web and log. So to me, it's like a business diary. A log is really, it's something that came from old nautical term. It originally meant just what it sounded. It was a physical log that they used to throw in the water on a rope, and they'd watch it pass the ship. And the number of times per second or whatever that the log passed the ship, they would get an idea for the speed the vessel was sailing at. The log was a known length. Okay, and then later it became almost like a captain's diary. So just some history for you. So the definition of a blog and how it differs from a website. So a blog has regular entries, something you'll likely update frequently, daily, weekly, what have you. And the posts and entries are organized by date. Again, almost like a diary. Websites tend to have more static pages that are grouped by category. And these days, honestly, the difference is very much blurred. Most websites have a blog. Most blogs have static pages. So really, the difference is minimal. Okay, so and most platforms allow you to post journal type entries and pages. So things like WordPress that we'll talk about, Blogger, and so forth. Okay, any questions so far, Scott?
No, I'm with you.
Okay. Okay, and I've got just some examples of what a blog looks like. I'm sure you've all seen them, but just in case you haven't, you can see here, here's an article. It's talking about how the iPhone 6 is a cheap piece of bendy junk. I haven't got one, so don't know. But and you can see here they've got like an archive with all the months and years. So this is a typical blog. Here's another blog, Neil Gaiman. So again, same sort of thing. He's got articles written by date, and you can scroll down on his real website or real blog, and you can see what he's got there. But he doesn't do a lot of pages. He mostly has just a blog of what's happening, what he's doing, etc. But if you look at the top, you'll see he does have our links up here to other things. So he has links and downloads. Where's Neil? So maybe his public appearances. He has message boards, which would be another application that would just link to. Okay. Okay, now John Le Carre, this is John Le Carre's website, but again, this is very much a hybrid website blog, and he's got a very clever setup here. What he's got is, these are snippets of 4 blog posts, and instead of giving you the date and time, it says intercepted 17 minutes ago. So it's kind of a spy vibe going on. So this is a really cool website, but in truth, it's actually a hybrid blog website. Okay, Dan Brown. Dan Brown's very much a traditional website. There's not much blog going on there. This particular page you're seeing there is the link about Dan. It gives a little bit of his background. You can get a list of his novels. The news section is actually some of the blog. He's got a media section. He's got a list of his films, and then he's got some other tidbits up there, as well as some links to social media, which are very important, obviously, on a website. Okay, so why bother having a blog or a website? Essentially because you want people to start finding you, and you also want search engines to start finding you. You want your name to start showing up in search results, especially in relation to whatever your subject matter expertise is. So if you're a space opera writer, and you've got a blog, you want the blog to start showing your articles that you're writing, maybe about movie reviews for science fiction movies or what have you. Another key function is to start collecting email addresses. I'll talk a bit more about that later, but this is a really key component because at any time your blog, your Facebook, your Twitter, any of those social media sites can just go down. They can close up shop. So if you're relying solely on social media or other people's platforms for connecting with your readers, it's kind of a dangerous thing to do. So a lot of authors collect email addresses, and this is basically how they've been doing direct marketing for as long as the internet's been around, so for like 20 years, with the World Wide Web, I should say. So that's something you need to do. And with a website, you can sell your books directly. You can do something as basic as creating PayPal links and selling digital books, or you can have people order physical books from you and you ship them out, but you can use a website to facilitate those things. Not having a website does make you look a bit like an amateur. But on the flip side, if you have a website but it's a really crappy looking website, that's just as bad. So, the key here is to make sure you've got one, but make sure it does, look as professional as you can make it. Okay? And essentially here, the main reason is so you can control the interaction with your fans. That's why you want a blog or website. Okay, so on a blog or website, what do you share? Well, like I said before, links to your books. You can also just also just post links to, say, Amazon or Kobo or wherever you're selling them. You don't have to necessarily sell them directly. You can talk about release dates, books that are coming up. I post sample chapters and sample scenes from my works in progress, so people can get an idea of, what I'm doing, and they can get a bit excited about characters or about some of the world building I'm doing. Links to social media, that's also nice as well. So you've got your blog, but you also want to let people know, hey, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Google+. And in many cases you can have the like or follow button directly on a blog or website so that it makes it easier for them to follow you in one spot. Something else I also do is reviews of other books I like. So books like, say, Jen Foner's Fluency. That was a great book. I put a review of that on my website. I just finished Scott James Magner's, oh goodness, I forget the title, I'm sorry, Scott, but I just finished his book and put a review up there as well. So things like that are fun to share with your fans because, it gives you an opportunity to talk to them about something that's science fiction related if you're an SF author or, whatever your genre is. Personal information, this is optional. Some people want to share who they are with their fans, others don't, so, that's up to you. Another option is an events calendar. So if you're doing things like book signings, if you want to do meetups at at a library or whatnot, these are the sorts of things you can put on a website as well. Okay, so let's talk a bit about social media. And most of you guys that are watching this presentation are probably on social media because you've either found this presentation on Facebook, you've either found the Hangout on Google+, so you're probably there already. But I thought it would be interesting to look at some stats. So here are the major social media sites and their monthly active users. I thought these were pretty striking. And another benefit to seeing these numbers is it can help you target which ones you want to use. So Facebook obviously has got 1.35 billion. That's a lot. YouTube's 1 billion. Google Plus is 500 million, and that number surprises me. I'm surprised it's that much. Instagram, 300 million. Twitter, 284. LinkedIn, 187. Now, another thing to notice about these social media platforms is they all have a different focus. So Twitter, for example, is very small conversations, 140 characters and lots of interaction. That's what it was designed for anyway. Instagram's all about sharing pictures, so maybe sharing book covers or whatnot. LinkedIn started and still tends to be a more professional site, so looking for a job, maybe you're looking for an agent, that's kind of the focus of that. Pinterest is another one where it's sharing pictures with 70 million users, and Vine is, they're like small looping videos, like animated GIFs, that sort of thing. So there's some of the major ones, and you can see how the users per month really drop off, or the registered users. So if I were you, I'd focus on some of the top ones in terms of your efforts of networking and whatnot. And here's just another little chart showing some of the various sites and their growth over the last few years. Okay, and as I mentioned before, do you just want to do social media? Absolutely not. Because you don't own it, you don't control it. And you want to be able to have a place where you can converse with your fans or connect with your fans that is something you control. That's really important. Okay. So here's a snapshot from my website. I highlighted the Twitter feed here over in the bottom left-hand corner. So my website is a combination of, it's based on a blog platform called Wordpress, but it really is a website because it has a lot of static pages. It has embedded content, but I also do a blog on it as well. So it's a bit of a hybrid as well. Okay, so building your email list. So I've mentioned this before. This is one of the most important things you want to do. Some authors have just, they've done really well without doing email lists. Others swear by it. So I do it, and I'm actively trying to grow my list, but I'm not sure. Some people are doing really well without having one. So again, I think I'd rather err on the side of being in control of the interaction with my own users by having my own list. And the nice thing about an email list too is you can sell directly to that list. Obviously, you don't want to be spammy. But what you can do is you can tell those people on your list the day you've got a new release, and that hopefully will do things for you, boost sales if these are good loyal fans. So something to think about. And just here's some more of the reasons I just mentioned. Okay, so how do you build a list? Well, you need a tool to collect them, and there's lots of different tools out there. Google has a tool called FeedBurner that basically allows people to sign up for your blog or for your website updates, but that essentially collects those email addresses. That's an older tool, and it's still used, but there's some newer tools. You need to entice people to share their email address. So how do you do that? Well, you can share some free content with them. I often give away short stories, or give them a free copy of my first book if they sign up for my email list, and so forth. And Joanna Penn's got a good article on list building, and the link is there. Okay, so here's a few tools. FeedBurner, as I mentioned, this is the freebie owned by Google. It's pretty simple to use and straightforward. The other two major options are MailChimp and Aweber, and both these are fairly new, just in the last few years. I use MailChimp right now because I have under 2,000 subscribers and it's free. When you get over 2,000 subscribers, then you pay monthly, which is fine. So once I get to that many subscribers, I'm happy to to give them some money. Aweber is another very popular tool, but you have to pay immediately. I don't think there's any free under a certain number of subscribers option like there is with MailChimp. So you can read more about these tools, but I think that's something that, in addition to getting a blog set up immediately, you also want to start collecting those email addresses. Okay, and I mentioned this already, but how do you get those addresses? Obviously, people often trade something free. Short stories, novellas, what have you. Audio readings is something else I've started doing. So I've got a couple of short stories that I've read, which you can do free. You can podcast to iTunes that costs you virtually nothing. So what do you do after you get all these users? Well, you want to be careful never to be spammy. Don't send them, a weekly post saying, buy my book, buy my book. But you want to, connect with them on a fairly regular basis. The industry standard says, every 2 weeks is the best, time frame. And you should share something that's interesting to your readers. Maybe, again, something like a review of a book, your thoughts on an upcoming movie in your genre, whatever. Let them know when you've got something coming out. And then when you do have a book to release, then let them know where they can buy it. So here's some links that you can take a look at and study up on some of this stuff. And I'll make sure that this presentation with all these links is posted somewhere so that you can refer to them after the fact, okay? Okay, any questions so far, Scott? Since you're the only guy I can talk to?
The only thing that I kind of pinged on my radar was when you mentioned YouTube, and I was trying to think of some way where you could actually use YouTube in this context. And I couldn't really think of anything other than like trailers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what people do. And a lot of people are doing book trailers and putting them on YouTube. And in many cases, their trailers consist of a slide deck that just transitions with some music and some words about their book. It's just, to me, that's almost not a video, but people are doing them, and I don't know. The best-selling book I've got is one of my nonfiction books called Northern Wisdom, and it outsells everything else I write by 10 times. And it's the only book I did a trailer for. So, do trailers work? I don't know. That book just happens to be a popular book, but I did do a trailer. I just don't know if there's a connection, because I never did track, how many people went from watching that, trailer to going and buying the book.
Can you do that?
Yeah, you can. You can. I just didn't have it set up at the time. You can make sure you've enabled something called Google Analytics. There's other ways to do it as well, and that way basically you track from where they're clicking and where they're going to get your book. So yeah, there's all kinds of sophisticated tools to track that sort of thing. Okay, so designing your blog or website. And again, before you do this is where you should have your goals and so forth mapped to the kinds of tools and data you want to collect and achieve. And an important point is design is not coding. Design is your kind of abstract strategy, right? Design is thinking, what you want on this website, where you want to place things. The implementation is the physical, typing in data and so forth. Okay, so I put some essential objectives up there. Yours may differ a little bit, but you want to let people find you. You want to tell people about what you've written and where to buy it. And we've gone over some of these already. You want to build a customer base, etc., etc. So I think you guys kind of know what you want your website to do now. Now, this is a list of questions I found in another article and I thought was really good. These are questions just to ask yourself as you're designing your website. Will people know what I write within seconds? That's a really important one. So let's say that you're writing space opera. Your website should look space opera-ish. Just like there are kind of unwritten rules about cover art for a book. You want the reader to look at something and go, oh gosh, yeah, I know what that is. It's going to be like a Star Wars book, or it's going to be like something else, a Hemingway book. You want to be able to connect visually, with your fans and let them know what you're writing. So for space opera, typically people have some kind of a spaceship or something on the cover of their book. Those are kind of known cues that readers pick up on that let them know they expect, to find what they're looking for in your book. So similarly with the website, try to have things, images or whatnot that resonate with the reader. Okay, Chuck Wendig asks about, does the voice or tone or attitude, mood of the site resonate with your ideal reader? So in a similar vein. So will they understand the page they're on and what it's about? So, make sure you have clear titles to your pages. Like if it's about yourself, maybe, the title's about the author, things like that. Will they know what to do next? So is there a logical navigation structure on your website? Most websites will have a horizontal bar at the top that have a series of buttons or a series of links that take them to the various places you want your readers to look at, whether it's a list of your books or your events or what have you. Does the site appear credible? Well, that's a good question, because if you've got a site with all kinds of crappy advertising for sunglasses and shampoo, that doesn't look like an author's website. So there are things you can embed, like with Google AdSense, but be careful with things like that. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing is again connecting with the theme of your website. Is it clear why they should buy my book or subscribe to free updates? So if you're trying to build your list, you want some kind of call to action. Subscribe to my list and get a free novel. Something very specific and very, straightforward. And what does the site provide to the reader? So my website, I try to make sure that they can read a bit about my books. They know a little bit about me. I try to make sure that they've got free content so that it's something interesting and engaging. But, these are things to just think about as you're designing your website. Okay, so features to meet your objectives. So you've already got your goals and your objectives written down, and now you want to know what features will help you enable that. So some of the essential ones are: you want a way to connect, email addresses, contact form, etc. You want a list of your books and links. You want an email sign-up form. So again, you can embed a FeedBurner link, or you can use MailChimp or Aweber. Maybe you want info about the author, a call to action, buy my book here, info on new releases. So those are kind of the top 6 that I think you should have on your site. Other things, testimonials and reviews are really nice. So I often take snippets from Amazon and whatnot. Some people say they don't have any value, but I like to show people what other people are saying about my books. Social media links, and this is another thing that I mentioned earlier, where on your website you can have kind of like a nexus where you have your Twitter account, you have your Facebook stuff, you have that all in one place so that your readers can see all that, as you saw on the example of my website. Okay, a blog, again, just to talk about what's going on, and maybe events calendar. Okay, so where do you get all these tools? So there's a lot of things you can get for free. Free is great, but usually there are some limitations. A, you don't control the platform, which is, again, really, really important, because, like I said, with Twitter or Facebook, not that I expect them to disappear anytime soon, but they could, But, free is a great starting place. That's how I started doing my blog for my nonfiction, which really sold me a lot of books. I was selling hundreds of books a month, which, is not a lot by some measures. But for an initial indie author, that was great for me. That's my nonfiction. My fiction is still kind of ramping up, but I really had great success initially with my nonfiction. And I used a free blogger from Google to do that. So we'll talk about 3 free options: Blogger, WordPress, and Weebly. Blogger and WordPress are essentially both blogging platforms, but they also do allow you to do static pages and whatnot. So WordPress, just to be clear, comes in 2 flavors. There's a free version at .com, and there's a free version in terms of they provide the hosting. There's another version where you can download the software and host it yourself. That's wordpress.org, which is a different thing we'll talk about in a little bit. Weebly is another platform that's free that allows you to create websites. It has a really pretty interface. I don't use it. Jen does. And so I've got some notes on that here as well. There is a comparison table, so I've linked that. You can take a look and see what you think of each of those options. Okay, we'll talk about Blogger first briefly. So the pros. Blogger is absolutely free. It's very simple to set up. It's owned by Google, which is a good thing. It has very robust hosting. Obviously, it's hosted on Google servers. It has excellent security. Because it's tied to Google, they manage all that sort of stuff. The main plus in my mind is the fast indexing. Because it's a Google-based platform, it tends to have its results kind of pushed up a little higher than something from, say, WordPress or some other non-name brand blogging platform. And because it's a Google property, it integrates nicely with other things like FeedBurner, like Gmail. So anyway, it's a convenient, cheap, free starting place. The cons are you don't own it. It doesn't scale very well, so if you want to, say, sell books directly on your website, that's a lot more difficult on something like Blogger. And it lacks distinction. Blogger has a very consistent-looking interface. Even though you can change the theme and whatnot, it's still, it doesn't look quite as distinct. And again, Blogger could go away. Google could go under. Probably never, but, it can happen. So upgrading later. If you do decide to start with Blogger, some services do allow you to transfer your posts. So say you've had 2 years of articles, you don't want to just throw those away. Those are that's a very valuable piece of content. HostGator and Bluehost do offer some migration options. So there's links there to just kind of look into that. Okay, the second option is WordPress. I didn't like WordPress at first, and there's lots of reasons for that. I used a tool called Joomla, which had all kinds of previous incarnations. It was very similar, but WordPress initially was just a blog. It did nothing but that, and it did it very well, but it didn't have a lot of capability to do static pages and things that a website does. So I always had a website/blog. That's always what I've done. And WordPress didn't do that initially very good, but now it's amazing, and I actually switched my websites to WordPress. But first we're going to talk about the free WordPress, which is slightly different. Okay, so the WordPress.com, that's a site like Blogger where you can go, you create an account, and you create a free blog, and you're ready to go. WordPress.org, this is where you actually download software and install it on a server that you're paying for by month. So like a HostGator package or whatnot. Okay, so that's the difference between WordPress and WordPress.com. The free version is great. It's like Blogger. It's a great place to start. But there are limitations. There are built-in ads. There's no third-party content, limited customization, and so forth. Scott, any questions on WordPress? Or?
No, I've got some experience with both
okay.
Blogger and WordPress.
Yeah.
Not on my own, but using other people's blogs, so I'm pretty familiar with them.
Okay.
The paid-for ones are the ones that I'd be interested in seeing what the differences are.
Yeah, the big bonus for the paid ones are that you can really customize them. You can put themes on them, which change the entire look and feel of it. There are plugins that are like little modules that you can add on to do everything. So WordPress is like a Swiss Army knife that you can add on to. It's really incredible. Okay, so I've talked about these pros really. I like the customization ability of WordPress better. So that's, in terms of the bottom line differences, I think really that's the only thing between the two free versions is the WordPress version looks a little bit better in my mind.
If I could jump in your head, as a social media user, and I don't know if this has, in my experience, for instance, Blogger, in the comments section of the Blogger, you pretty much just have a linear one-way conversation. WordPress, on the other hand, allows replies to comments. I don't know that Blogger does that. Maybe there's a module of Blogger that allows that, but most of the Blogger sites that I've used over the years, or that I've participated in over the years, it's just, comments going down the page, and, somebody may say something and you reply to it later on, but there's no tying the two comments together, whereas WordPress, the replies are in line. You know what I mean?
Right, so you're talking about it like a nested thread of conversation.
Right. Somebody, you say something or somebody says something, and then there's a reply option, and then it's a more coherent, not necessarily for the person that's providing the content, but certainly for the people that are using the content, that are making comments based on the content. I think it's a better experience for the user, the reader, than Blogger.
Yeah, good point. I haven't used it in quite a long time, to be honest, but yeah, that may be a good thing to note. Okay, the cons of WordPress versus Blogger. It's a bit more complex to set up. Some of the monetization strategies. So Blogger allows you to embed Google AdSense. Basically, it means that when your readers are on your blog, if you have Google AdSense enabled, Google tries to put up ads that relate to the content. So if you're talking about a space opera book, they'll try to pop up an ad about, say, a Star Wars movie or something like that. And these ads can make you money. If you've got an affiliate account and people click through, you get paid a small sum for that. So WordPress doesn't, the free version of WordPress doesn't have a very good integration or any integration with things like Google AdSense or affiliate marketing. And you can't install plugins in the free version, which really, again, makes it stay just like a blog or like a blogger. So much like Blogger, you can upgrade later from, say, WordPress free to the hosted, your self-hosted service. HostGator and Bluehost do that as well, so you can take a look at some of those options as well. The reason I mention these upgrading options is because if you really can't afford the $15 a month or whatever for a hosting of your own website, that's fine. A lot of people can't when they're just getting started out in these things, and so WordPress free or Blogger are fine places to start, but you just want to have it in the back of your mind if you do need to migrate in a year down the road that you can do that. And with those two platforms, you certainly can do that. Okay, I do not know a lot about Weebly, but I'm going to post a few facts that I researched, and I posted some links to some videos and so forth. Sorry, the pros are pretty small. It's an attractive looking interface, and from what I understand, they're very easy to build. Cons, much like any of the other ones, you don't control the platform. So you don't have ultimate control of that Weebly website unless you do the paid version. So the site is 100% tied to that one company. Okay? And there's a detailed list of cons there in that Google link, which will be available afterwards. And there's there's a tutorial there, and there's a Weebly versus WordPress comparison on YouTube that you can look at just to get an idea, of what those things look like if you're actually going in behind the scenes and tinkering with stuff. And here's some links to more how-to videos. There's one for Blogger, one for the WordPress free, one for Weebly, and the last one is the WordPress hosted. That's a big video with lots of stuff. So, get your thinking cap on and bring a Bring a big notepad and lots of sharpened pencils when you watch that one. Okay, so advanced options. Domain names. So what is a domain name? It's like a street address for your website. So my domain name is hughblong.com, www.hughblong.com. And basically what that does is it allows people on the internet to find your server. Now your server address can change. So you may put your website on a server in Kansas City, and then maybe a year later you decide to host it in Texas, and the next year in China, wherever. So your physical code that your website is running on can be anywhere. And the website address basically is like a phone number. It tells them where how they can find you. Okay? And the other example I've got here is it's akin to longitude and latitude. But most folks just want to know, hughblong.com. That's easy to remember, as opposed to an IP address, which is like 192.168.11.4. It's a big string of numbers, Okay, so that's what domain names are. They're very important because, this is another instance where you control this. You own this thing, or I guess really you rent it, because if you don't pay for it every year, you relinquish it. But and you can also tie it to yourself. So, say you're a writer, hughblong.com. People can just know my name and go and find me on the web. It makes things a lot simpler. Some of the other reasons are, it appears more professional. You can have your own personalized email address. So, I have my author@hughblong.com. You can even give other people addresses on your domain if they're working for you or with you or whatever. Okay. So where do you get one? You go to something called a name registrar. These are organizations authorized by the government in each country to register domain names. GoDaddy.com is just one example. There's lots of them out there. You can go ahead and research them. I've used GoDaddy for quite a long time. They've done fine for me. If you get a web hosting package, like going to GoDaddy, for example, you can often get web hosting and your domain name bundled as part of a little package. So, that's a nice option. And the domain name itself typically costs around $15 a year. Some of them are as low as like $4.99 per year, depending on the suffix, like whether it's a .com or a .info or a .net. The fee changes. Okay. So what domain name should you choose? Well, my recommendation is if you're an author, use your name. Some people use books. I did this when I very first got started. My first book was called Northern Lore. I still own the domain and I still have that website, but it's not a lot of fun to maintain a website and a domain for every book you publish. At the time, it was the only book I was going to publish. I wasn't, thinking about a long-term career, but if you're an author and you're watching this, you probably are thinking about more than one book. So if you are, I would stick to using your name or, something that is meaningful and will be extensible, okay? You want to build your brand, essentially. Okay, timeline and planning. Bottom line, get started now. It's never too early. And like I've told some of you on Facebook, it can take months for things like Google and Yahoo to find you in terms of search engines and indexing you. So the earlier you get started, even if you don't have a lot of content, that's fine. Get your web address submitted to these places, okay? Okay, so the bare minimum. If you want to walk away from this presentation, print out this one slide. This is what you should be doing. You should have a Twitter account. You should have a Facebook page. You should go and register with FeedBurner to collect email addresses. Go to Blogger, create a free blog, and then make sure you connect the FeedBurner with it. And again, the reason I'm recommending those two, if you're just doing the bare minimum, is because they're both owned by Google, and it just makes things a little bit easier in terms of indexing and whatnot. Google controls 75% of all the web searches, so that's a huge number. At the bottom, there's a little comparison of the various blogs, so you can take a look at that in your own time. So one of the last things is self-hosting. I absolutely recommend it. If you can afford it, please do that. The package is typically around $10 a month for a shared server, which means there'll be multiple websites on the same server, which really means nothing to you because you're not going to see those other websites. The domain name is only $15 a year, so let's say $135 a year total. You can have your own website. Yeah, so that's about it on that. I think that's the best way to go. If you can afford it, yeah, do that. Do that right away. Okay, so I think that's really about it. I've just got some links for you guys. These are some websites that I like. The Creative Pan, Right to Done, Jane Friedman, etc. Here's a few of the things that I enjoy reading. Books. Here's a couple. The Indie Author Power Pack actually has one of Joanna Penn's books in it. But she is fantastic. She's a really sharp lady. She was a marketer and a businesswoman before she became a writer, so she really kicks ass when it comes to, understanding the business end of writing and getting her work sold. So I really admire her and I like her stuff. Podcasts, again, Joanna Penn there, she's at the top. The self-publishing podcast is really interesting. That is, let's see, Johnny B. Truant, David Wright, and Platt. These guys are really, really fascinating. They've done all kinds of serial fiction. Fat Vampire, The Beam, really, really good stuff. They're tremendous indie publishers. Okay, so those are some podcasts for you. And that's it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at author@hughblong.com. Notice I've got my cool little email address with my own domain name there. And I'm happy to take questions. I'll probably put together an advanced session where we actually go through setting up a WordPress site and going through the nitty-gritty of, adding on plugins and themes and doing all kinds of, behind-the-scenes stuff. But hopefully, those are some basics and some things to get you started. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions and still have lots of things to learn after this anyway. Any questions from you, Scott?
No, that covered pretty much everything. I've had anything, the paid sites. I'm ready to move up into that.
Yeah.
I'm ready to move up into the paid services. So that's where that's the truth for me.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there.